Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Silver Years. My name is DK, and I'm very happy to be here. And I humbly thank you for joining me. This is a new segment today of my story time, for whatever it's worth. This is my little protest against history, his story, by telling my story my way. Now, my story time is just me telling my stories from my life as I experience them, stories that make up my story, not his story. Stories that are authentic and unique to me and my experiences. And these stories are a part of my legacy and the genetic imprints that I leave to my future generations, who, by the way, don't even really know about these stories because they just never came up. Maybe because my story is a mystery. It's a mystery until it isn't. Overall, these stories probably only have meaning to me, but hopefully you'll find some meaning in them too, or not. I'm going to tell them anyway, for the record. Now, today I'm going to start in Denver, 1985. I was living there. My hair was very short. I don't even know how to compare it to. It was quite very short, shaved in the back and everything. And it was the look. It was pretty predominant. I used to get stopped on the street, the 16th Street Mall, because I worked off of that street in one of the tall office buildings. And I used to get stopped when I walked down the street, people thinking that I was a news anchor, a local news anchor at one of the Denver stations. Her name was Madeline McFadden, I think. And she had really short hair. She was quite cute and everything, but it was the hair. People would see the hair and they would liken me to Madeline McFadden. And it was a standout. People would stop me on the street, and that's important to note in this story. So it's about 1985 Denver. And as a setup, I want to say that, a few years prior to this, my mother, who was living in California, would say to me every once in a while, you should model, she would say, which always struck me as kind of odd because my mother had taught us never to base our advancements in life on our looks. I mean, our looks were never given much credence, and we were always taught to focus more on what we could produce and our intellect. Not so much on the looks, but she used to say, "You should model," and I would say to her, "Oh, no, no, I'm too short. I'm too heavy." I wasn't rail thin or anything. I wasn't heavy, but by the standards of modeling, I was heavy. And she would just, "Oh, no, no, makeup. You should model makeup. Just, just use your face. You should be modeling makeup." And I would say, "Oh, no, no." And several years went by, and she was coming into town for a holiday weekend. So I was at Stapleton Airport, which doesn't exist anymore. It's now Denver International, but Stapleton was a really great airport, and you could just pull up when the arrivals came outside a baggage claim, and it was kind of curved like a crescent, and there would be 3 to 4 rows of cars just totally stopped and parked, waiting for passengers to come out with their bags. And I was one of them. And I was probably about 2 or 3 rows out. And I was closer to the front versus the back of the crescent. So I was more to the front of the crescent. And I was about 3 rows out. And I had a Jeep. I had a CJ7. So what I had done, I was wearing this beautiful purple Pendleton suit with fry boots. It was really the outfit that I had on was stunning. I admit it was probably one of my favorites. You can't find any of this anymore. Some part of me wishes I had kept that suit, but I no longer have it. But it was purple, and I had on high fry boots that came up to my knees, and I was standing on this Jeep up on the platform up by the seat when you get in. If you know, it's like a high truck, so you got to step up high. And so I was standing above the hood of the car and looking out, looking for my mother to come walk out of the airport. So I was just kind of staring around and looking at all the cars. I mean, they were all the way down the crescent on in both directions, and there were so many people. And way down at the back, I saw somebody start walking and weaving through the cars in towards my direction. Now this was a woman in a white pantsuit with the jacket, and it was pretty stand out. But she was walking and weaving, and every once in a while I would kind of glance over there and watch her, and she was getting closer and closer, and I didn't really put much into it. And then there came a point when I looked down and she was standing right next to me, and I was looking down at her, and she hands me this card. She reaches up and hands me this card, and I look at it, and she was an executive vice president from JF Images, which was a popular, well, not just popular, it was the only modeling agency in the Midwest, the biggest one at the time. I don't think it exists anymore, but she was from this company, JF Images. And she hands me this card and she says, "I want you to call me." And I said, "Call you? Why? Why would I call you? I want you to call me." And I said, "Well, I called you people 2 years ago and you didn't want anything to do with me." And she says, "I want you to call me now." And I said, "Okay." I didn't think anything of it. I was like, whatever. And then she left, and I watched her walk all the way back to her vehicle, wherever it was. I don't even know what it was. And then within 5 minutes, my mother comes out and she loads up the car. We get in the car and we start driving away. And I said, "You'll never guess who approached me while I was waiting for you to come out of the airport." So I told her the story. And she said, "I told you, I told you." Well, when she had nagged me a couple years earlier, I did go to JF Images, okay? But at the time, I mean, at this time, my hair was really short, but at the time, my hair was very long. It was virgin hair. It was beautiful, but it was past my butt. I mean, it was really long. And I had gone to see them. And by the way, I never wore makeup. I mean, I was more I wasn't a hippie, but I was on the fringe of that generation. And so wearing makeup, I was more inclined to go natural. So I didn't really wear makeup. And so that wasn't part of the equation either. But I had gone to see this company a couple years earlier. And basically, I was told I was too short and I was too heavy, exactly what I had been saying to my mother. And I was told, well, I don't know, maybe if you cut your hair, and I was like, well, I'm not inclined to change for you people. I mean, you don't seem too interested. And that was sort of my attitude about it. And I pretty much wrote it off as being something that wasn't going to happen. So, and then here I am 2 years later, and this woman from the same company hands me a business card and says, "Call me." But by this time, my hair was short and I looked different. Not that I wasn't really wearing makeup. So I did call. I did call and I did go see her. And I ended up being enlisted to become part of that whole thing. Of course, they got my money. I got trained in makeup and whatnot. I never really learned to walk the model's walk because I guess they thought that, I wasn't of that caliber, and I wasn't, that's a fair statement. Um, but I did learn how to do the makeup and I did learn how to do different things. And then ultimately they sent me on casting calls for different things, which I admittedly wasn't well suited for. Okay. I really wasn't well suited to it. But what I came in and I worked with a guy who didn't care if I went on these casting calls. He didn't really care, and I'd say, "Oh, I'll be back in a few hours," And I found it to be really frustrating because, I would be trapped in these audition rooms with these girls who all they cared about were their looks and all their things, and getting hired. I never got hired. I was never I just Here's the thing. I wasn't suited to it, and I knew that I wasn't suited to it, but it was an experience. I learned so much, and I have tremendous appreciation for those who do it because it's very hard. It's very hard, and it's a lot of work. Um, just the projection of your energy and just maintaining the appearance and all these things, and then they sort of stopped sending me on things because they said I was just not thin enough. And mind you, I was just the wisp of a thing. Okay. So their standards, like I said, were totally unrealistic. But I think in the end it was just I was not um it was not for me. It was not for me. I enjoyed learning about the makeup and all that. And then I started wearing makeup after that. Okay. But they were definitely about promoting their stuff, and they were definitely about recruiting people and getting them to pay for their classes and services and things like that, more so than the representation. But was it a waste for me? No, it wasn't. And I did come to realize that I appreciated more. It was less about the look of it, but for many many years, during after that, in my corporate years, I was very well made up and put together. And when I told the story about Gog of Magog and wearing the glasses to get a job, and my former colleague said, "Yeah, it took the glamour off." Well, he was right. There was a reason for that statement, because by that time I would put on my corporate mask before I would go into the office, and that included being fully made up. And I never left the house unless I was. Of course, that changed as um, I think when I turned 60, I was over it completely. Makeup had is just not a priority for me. Yeah, I'll touch up with a little color here and there because color's nice. But my favorite is lipstick. Always was, always will be. I think I liked mixing and matching colors on my lips, and so that was probably one of the biggest gifts that I got. But it was kind of fun having the experience. Um, and I was discovered at an airport, standing on my car, looking over the hood, trying to wait for my mother to come out of the airport. So my little story today, for whatever it's worth. Um, in the meantime, I would love to hear your stories as well. For the record today, this is my story, and I'm sticking to it. So until next time, be well, choose love, and thank you for listening. Goodbye for now.